This is Know Better with your host, Kipper Jones.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kipper Jones, and welcome to Know Better. I appreciate you for tuning in tonight. The purpose of Know Better is very simple. It's to inform and to educate all of you and all of us to the issues that are pertinent to today. And so I'm so very glad that you guys are tuning in and watching us at Know Better. I want to let you know that it's been a dream of mine to get this sort of opportunity. You probably know me as a singer and a songwriter and an entertainer, but it's always been a dream of mine to have this opportunity to operate from basically where I'm sitting right now and do what we're doing. So you're watching a guy live his dream right now, and I appreciate you for tuning in. Today's show is going to highlight a couple of things, and one, of course, is we're going to be interviewing Fulton County Sheriff candidate Charles Rambo, and I'm very excited to be able to sit down with him and pick his brain about some things that I think are important in our community. I've also kind of solicited some questions from other people, and I'm going to be asking him some of those tough questions as well. But first, we are going to have a conversation with Ms. Bernita Smith from the DeKalb County 2020 Census. She's the program manager for the DeKalb County 2020 Census. And most of you may know, and if you don't, that 2020 is a census year. Every 10 years, the nation does a census, a count of all the citizens in the country. And it goes into effect this spring. I think I'll let Ms. Smith talk more about that. But ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Bernita Smith, the program manager for the DeKalb County 2020 Census. Ms. Smith.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. How are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Awesome. Thank you for joining us at Know Better. I appreciate you. So tell our audience more about how the census operates and what it's all about, if you would, if you kind of give us a brief overview of that.
Okay. Well, the census started in 1790, and it's really a count of the population. And this count determines two main things: power, which it determines how your representatives are formed, and the congressional districts. So when you hear the terms gerrymandering, redistricting, well, they get that from actually the census count. And the second thing the census helps determine is money. So how federal dollars are sent back to states, counties, and cities is based on the count of the population. So the more population you have, the greater your share of the federal dollars are. And these are your federal tax dollars that you are sending out. So the idea is let us get more folks counted in DeKalb. We can also shape our future.
Great. Now, the funds that come from the federal government that come into your states, counties, and cities now, those federal funds come from our tax dollars. Am I correct?
Yes, those are your tax dollars. And what happens if 100% of DeKalb is counted, we can receive $1.75 billion annually, which will help our schools, healthcare, transportation, affordable housing. These are what, when you hear folks write grants, they use the census dollars, and that's the money they receive. So if you live on a block and there's like 1,000 cars that travel, and your community needs better road network, but the census only shows that only 500 people were counted, well, we're going to get, as a county, we're going to be lowered on the scale of when they decide how to divvy out the funds, because we are showing that we don't have enough people in that community.
And that's because certain people don't participate in the census? Is that what
Yes,
you're saying?
because
Okay.
folks did not participate in the census. So overall, every individual in DeKalb brings back $2,314 in federal dollars. So if you think about that, that's if 10 people did not do the census, then we're missing $23,000 annually. So if you multiply that by a whole lot, So in 2000, DeKalb County had a 78% response rate. That's how many people responded to the census. And from that, we were able, and then in 2010, it dropped down to 72%. So we lost $300 million annually since 2010 because we had a low response rate.
Now that's pretty drastic. That is
It
pretty
is.
drastic, especially when you know that I'm very aware that in DeKalb County the population actually increased. And you know that,
Yeah.
but when we have people underreporting, then you get underfunded for more people, which
So
is
historically, children under 5 are the most undercounted in the country. So if you think about it, if a kid is 5 years old and we don't count them, now we won't be able to count them again for another 10 years. So that child is now 15. So when we start talking about or trying to understand the pipeline problem that we have in this country with children, it's because we don't have those resources for 10 years to help fund after school programs, daycare center, early learning programs, because they're not being counted. So they're not, we can't request funds for, children. And the federal government doesn't use anecdotal data. They use hard concrete stats. And
right.
that's what the census is. It provides us that. So every business that comes into DeKalb County uses the census data to determine where they should locate.
Wow.
So
Now,
when we say in our communities we're not receiving or we've got bad businesses, we're only using the census data that's available.
this next question is kind of twofold. Now, this is the first census that will be using the internet. Yes.
Yes. First
Okay.
census.
And also, there will be a door-to-door as well, or how does that work?
Well, what's different this year from 2010 is the first difference is the first interaction you'll receive with the federal census won't be the form. So normally you receive the form like, well, in 2010 you received the form and someone came knocked on your door. Well, that's not going to happen because one, the federal census budget has been cut significantly. So what you will receive is a postcard. On this postcard, there's a unique ID for every household. Every individual will not receive it. Every household will receive that postcard. And so you can actually go and complete your survey, and there'll be a web link to it. You complete your survey, your census survey that way. And so the first time, we all should start receiving it between March 12th and March 20th. You'll receive your first postcard. And then between March 16th through the 24th, you'll get a reminder. It says, oh, you haven't turned in your census form yet. And then you'll get a third reminder. And then at the third reminder, they'll send you a form. But the way they're doing it, it's not just online. So I don't want folks to think that that's the only way you can do it. You can actually call the census folks. And we'll have a list of numbers posted on our website, DeKalbCounts2020.org, where you can actually call the census and complete it. And it'll be available in 13 languages. If you're deaf or hard of hearing, there'll also be a number. And you can also, in DeKalb County, you'll be able to, if you don't have internet access, you can go to all of our senior centers, all of our rec centers, and all of our libraries to actually complete the form. We'll have computers available for people. And we'll also have one at where you go pay your water bill and at the work source. So we're trying to think innovative and outside the box because the stats show that 14% of DeKalb County residents don't have internet at home.
Wow. And I'm sure that's probably unanimous throughout the state and all of the other counties too. There's underrepresented or underserved communities as far as the internet is concerned.
Yes.
So one more question. When you say the funds that come to DeKalb County, and there's a state count, a county count, and is that cities too, or how does that work?
Yes.
Okay. So are all of them also funded through the census?
Yes.
The state is funded, the counties?
Any dollars, any resources they need, they all will apply to try to get federal grants for.
Okay. So that's not just... Again, that's not just funding, but it's congressional representation as well, right?
Yes.
So
it's also your state and county, your state and your county representative too. Yes. So in December, the numbers come out, the census count numbers, and that's when they start redrawing boundaries, political boundaries.
Awesome. And one more thing I just kind of wanted to add, and I wanted to tell you that my brother is doing a lot of research into our family history. And
Yes.
a lot of the history that he's finding out is available to him through the census that has happened again since the late 1700s. And so we're finding out so much of our family histories through that. And so I just kind of wanted to share with the people. I know there's always like an anti-government sort of resistance. I don't want to operate in that because I don't want them to have my information. They probably already have your information. If you've ever had a job, you got a driver's license. If you've ever had a child or rented an apartment, everybody, we're all known. But it's about your legacy as well. And if you want people to be able to find you and know who their grandparents were and know who their ancestors were, this is one great way to participate in that as well. So not just the funding and the representation, but your legacy as well. So I
And if
wanted
you
to add
think
that.
about it, you give more information. The census won't ask for your social security number. It doesn't ask whether you're a citizen or not. So, and none of the data that you include on your census form can be shared.
How
None
about
of them can be shared. And if anyone accesses your data, it's a federal crime, and they will be fined $250,000 plus a jail sentence. And you can't share it with your apartment manager. You don't share it with your job. None of that information, and it isn't shared with other government agencies. What they do is just group it. They aggregate the total number for an area. So the other thing is, if you think about all the data that you give to private companies like Facebook and Google, and you give more information to them than you actually will when you fill out the census form. And you're allowing a private company that you don't know what they're doing with the data, already all that information about your family, your households, your choices. So what we're asking from the census is really just to count your age, who lives there, what's the relationship.
Well, that's awesome.
As we say, it's 10 questions, takes you 10 minutes, and it equals 10 years of funding for DeKalb County.
Perfect. Well, Ms. Smith, thank you so very much. And I know you represent DeKalb County. Would you like to tell the people how they can, the website information again, so they can contact you?
It's DeKalbCounts2020.org, or you can follow us on social media by finding our hashtag, CountMeInDeKalb. And we're doing our best. We need as many volunteers as we can. If you want to just go out and canvass your neighborhood, put a flyer or a door hanger in your neighborhood, just let us know. And we'll be able to provide you the information, provide you all the data and, the materials that you need to help. And if you go to a church or fellowship with others, we're asking all our churches in DeKalb County to have their doors open so folks can use their computers in order to complete their census form.
Absolutely. And there's a national website as well, right? Census2020.org?
Yes.
Is that what it is? Yes. So for the people that don't live in DeKalb County that would like to find out how they can participate as well. Ms. Smith, thank you so very much. I truly appreciate you. Hey, why don't you stand back a little bit and show them your fancy T-shirt? Yeah.
Okay.
Yay. See, she's got DeKalb Counts Census 2020. Yay. I got to get one of those from you.
Okay.
All right.
That's not a problem. You can wear it on your show on April 1st.
There we go. All right, Ms. Smith, thank you so very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. Ms. Bernita Smith, Program Manager from DeKalb County 2020 Census. Thank you all. So listen, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our special guest, Fulton County Sheriff Candidate Charles Rambo. Welcome
This
back.
is No Better.
Welcome back to Know Better. Our special guest this evening has an incredibly impressive law enforcement resume. In his over 30-year career, he has reformed one of the most dangerous county jails in the Southeast, provided a contingency plan to restore public confidence during the 2004 courthouse shooting in Atlanta, and is credited by the AJC as having saved the position of Fulton Sheriff against a legislative effort to abolish the position altogether. He enjoys an unavoidable recognition and street credibility in countywide communities as a tough love professional who meets people face to face with a quick mind to get things done without bureaucracy. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Rambo.
Thank you, Kipper. I appreciate you having me on your show this evening.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I love that your website bio begins, every candidate has worthy experience and a platform to be sheriff of Fulton County. But only one is just more meaningful than the others. So humility and strength all at the same time.
Yes, sir. And if you notice inside of the words experience, it only defines how long you've done it. Expertise defines how well you have done it over those particular years. And inside of my expertise, working inside of the county jail, working in law enforcement and communities, serving as a senior instructor at the police academy, specializing in human resources, executive protection, you name it. I pretty much have done it within inside the span of my career. And with that, I'm also a published author. I also publish training material, curriculum that is consistent with 21st century policing and some of the things that I hope to address with you this evening.
Absolutely, absolutely. So many of us don't know the difference between the sheriff and the chief of police. We know the sheriff is elected and the chief of police is appointed. We do know that, but would you care to explain the role of the sheriff and who the sheriff is, who the sheriff is accountable to, and the importance of the job?
Yes, sir. First and foremost, since 1776, Georgia has ingrained the office of sheriff as a constitutional officer. He is actually the only law enforcement officer that is named in Georgia's constitution with a law enforcement role specific to the county. With inside of that, he also, as you stated, is an elected position, which means that he has a little bit more sovereign authority in how he executes his duties. Now, to anyone who is a police officer or chiefs that might be listening in, this is not a slight at you, but with that is that chiefs answer to a board of commissioners or to a city council or a mayor. The sheriff answers to no political figure. He only answers to the people who have elected him. And this is what is needed in today's society, is that independent figure that is separate from politics, that can go directly in, as you said earlier, go into the community and get things done without bureaucracy. He also is responsible for the maintenance of the county jail, the enforcement of civil and criminal warrants, whether that be through execution of warrants or service of civil process. He is responsible for the security of the courts, but most important, the sheriff is responsible by oath of the Constitution of the state of Georgia as well as the United States in terms of protecting the people's rights inside of his county.
Got it. Okay, that accountability piece, though, being that they're only really accountable to the people who elect them, we've also seen where that there is an abuse of power in certain situations by the person in that position, in the sheriff's position. So how is that reined in, for lack of a better term? Is it only through the elective process, or how do you hold people accountable when there is that abuse of power?
You're absolutely correct. The sheriff, again, is elected by the people, and that's the way that the Constitution of Georgia set it up. In fact, that's how most constitutions in the United States sets up the office of sheriff. But I want to beg to differ that we just don't pick on the sheriff and abuse of powers. We have mayors that abuse powers.
Oh, absolutely.
Who are they accountable to?
Right.
We have governors, we have presidents, we have people all over the spectrum of government that have abused power. Ultimately, Government belongs to the people, and they're responsible for becoming informed voters about who they're sending into those particular positions.
Absolutely. Okay, last summer, a federal judge ordered Fulton County to take immediate steps to improve the treatment of mentally ill women being held in a jail annex in Union City. After concluding that they were being held for prolonged periods in solitary confinement and in filthy conditions. You went before the Fulton County Commission and argued for funding, and that was an incredible piece. I actually saw that in researching. But you've proposed in your plan to turn around these, what you call unconstitutional conditions, within 60 days. In light of the governor's deep projected budget cuts, how is that proposal feasible?
Well, first and foremost, I introduced the system in 2009 into the Fulton County Jail. It's called CompStat. And I was given very little resources, but expected to do a very big project. I had very few people that were assigned to me. Mm-hmm. But I went in with the spirit of, again, expertise, knowing exactly what that particular federal consent decree order was dictating and how to get things done through performance management. So I didn't really have a whole bunch of money. What I had was the trust of the deputies, excuse me, as well as the trust of the inmates, that they saw that we were being legitimate and that we were being very transparent about what we were doing. Mm-hmm. As it pertains to the Fulton County Jail Annex, I actually opened up that facility, was sent there as the transitional commander to get the facility prepared. Mm-hmm. We got that facility prepared and we ran it like clockwork. So I don't understand how we came out of a federal consent decree order, but now you're definitely getting ready to possibly go back inside. That tells me something's not right with the current management, and that's not a slight. It's a matter of what have you done in 12 years that your facilities have gone almost into degradation. With that, you stated about 60 days of getting it done. Yes, I do believe that I can do that. 60 days in on A&E portrayed the worst. Now, I know that we have criminals locked up inside of jail, but our people in particular were portrayed as if they were animals inside of unsanitary conditions. Why didn't the incumbent highlight the successes that had come before that and continued on what we had built upon? So that's why I'm feeling compelled to get back inside, because I'm prepared, I'm progressive, as well as proven in terms of what I will and can do inside of that county jail.
All right. So you've also made a commitment to addressing mental health, or as you say in the description of your platform, to decriminalize how law enforcement officers interact with a person who has a mental illness by providing continuing education to all law enforcement officers in Fulton County on alternatives to arresting and incarceration in our county jail. To that point, Georgia laws that criminalize people living with HIV have resulted in 571 arrests from 1988 to 2017, according to state-level criminal history record information analyzed by the Williams Institute. Now, many studies, including the CDC, have found that a person with HIV who takes his HIV medicine as prescribed and gets and stays virally suppressed or undetectable can stay healthy and has effectively no risk of sexually transmitting HIV to HIV-negative partners or anyone else. Or undetectable equals untransmittable. There's even legislation, HB 719, sponsored by Deborah Silcox, a Republican from Sandy Springs, to address this. So should the same decriminalization apply here?
Yes. I want to answer that on two folds. Let's come to the mental health portion. Mm-hmm. One is that we have two processes that are already in place. They're called 1013s as well as a order to apprehend. A 1013 allows for a physician or a report of peace officer to take a person into custody and deliver them to the nearest emergency receiving facility for evaluation or for treatment. And most of those 1013s are directed specifically towards the sheriff, who by law is responsible for the taking of custody as well as the transfer. I have executed, my partners are probably listening, I'm probably understating, probably over 1,000 of those orders over a period of time, and we never lost any particular person's life. Yeah, we've had to struggle with a few, don't get me wrong, but also the probate court allows for two persons who have observed the person's behavior within the past 48 hours to come and to swear out affidavits saying, hey, Your Honor, this person is either a drug dependent, alcoholic, or cannot care for themselves. Once that affidavit has been sworn, it is given to the sheriff's office, and we're expected to go and execute. But guess what? We don't take them to jail. We take them directly to emergency receiving facilities. The unfortunate part about it, during the 80s and the 90s, all around that era of mass incarceration, those facilities start shutting down. Yes. And when they start shutting down, guess what? The Fulton County Jail, like other county jails across the United States, became the new mental health institute. So with that, there are so many different other ways that we can deal with getting people to treatment as opposed to incarceration. And with that expertise that I bring to the table, I do want to start some type of triaging program where the sheriff's office, emergency receiving facilities, as well as those persons who are evaluating, we can make sound assessments about getting the person to where they need to go. I would like to address the HIV issue because we have a vast population of persons that have HIV that are housed in the Fulton County Jail. And guess what? I was assigned to that particular unit, I'm going to say it on camera, as punishment. I had just run for sheriff before. So it was a matter in terms I had the direct order that I needed to have exposure to those persons who had HIV. But watch how God turns it around. Instead of it working out for my evil, it worked out for my good. And in that, we were able to get the guys to get to their medications. We were able to get them into sanitary conditions. We got them to get into holistic living that gave them an opportunity to see life a little bit more abundantly as opposed to just limited, narrow thinking. So I was grateful to that because it gave me great relationships with people in different communities, whether it was the LGBTQ community or even just in the straight community. People began to see that I was not afraid of who they were. That's why I say I can meet people where they are and get things done.
That whole criminalization piece, though, it's you can be arrested for spitting on someone, an officer or whatever, because if you're HIV positive, knowing that the science again has stated that if you're undetectable, then you're untransmittable. So the effort to get more these laws based on science have gone forward. I mean, because they should be based on science and not just pandemonium and just excitement about what people think. They should be based in fact. So that was my question. Would there be a different approach to arresting people just based on science and not just hysteria?
Well, as you said, in those particular instances, we never know what a person, diseases or any particular illnesses that they have at the point of arrest.
Sure.
With that, we do have processes that all persons are required when they come in through the booking intake area is to come in and they have to be tested. Sometimes that test may not come back in the timely fashion of them either going up to the floors for housing or perhaps maybe bonding out and going back out into communities. With that, I really wish I could give a solid answer towards the criminalization because we never know what that person is infected with unless they disclose it to us, or we knew, or they should have known, that they had a status that they should have reported in that process.
Yeah.
So it becomes a fine line in terms of whether it's criminalizing it because of an actual act or whether you're criminalized because you're actually discriminating against someone. And I'm totally against any type of discrimination against any persons.
Yeah, that's. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that point, but it's even if you had sex with someone and they didn't know or found out that you were HIV positive and reported it, you can call the police on someone and have them arrested.
Absolutely.
In this state. And again, even if they were undetectable, but then you have to go through this whole process, I guess, to prove it, or I don't know, but it wouldn't even matter whether you proved it or not while these draconian laws are still in effect. So that's just kind of where I'm headed with that question. It just seems like I don't want you to have to put yourself in the position to say, oh, well, no, I wouldn't arrest them because I would know that they weren't. But, it's a very prevalent issue in the community. So I just kind of wanted to.
Well,
get
that's
your
why you
thoughts
have to
on it.
have someone who's in office that understands different communities and knows how to relate to communities and can come in still with the same law and order effect, but also with the sensitivity as well as the understanding that we're not coming in to discriminate. We're coming in to enforce the law specifically according to what the Constitution and the state of Georgia requires us to do. And again, without discrimination.
Perfect. Thank you. Your website also says that you firmly believe that everyone should have the opportunity for the path to citizenship in one of the greatest countries in the world. However, being a part of an international community, we must verify immigration status without an evil eye focus on a person's nationality to protect Fulton County from persons or groups posing a security threat in communities. As of Friday, February 14th, the New York Times is reporting that the Trump administration, through Immigration and Customs Enforcement and U.S. Border Patrol Tactical Unit, known as BORTAC, is developing or deploying law enforcement tactical units from the southern border as part of a supercharged arrest operation in sanctuary cities across the country. An escalation in the president's battle against localities that refuse to participate in immigration enforcement. Additional agents are expected to be sent to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Houston, Boston, New Orleans, Detroit, and Newark, New Jersey. Does this method of immigration enforcement correspond with your plan? If not, how would you deal with federal intrusion?
With that, foremost, let's define sanctuary city. There's no legal definition of a sanctuary city. It's more or less a political term that those who otherwise would embrace immigrants to come in, whether they are documented or undocumented, it's the way of saying, we are a city or a county that embraces all. Mm-hmm. I'm not concerned about enforcing immigration on the streets. That is the federal government's job. However, when we do have persons that are booked into our jail, we have a requirement of checking all persons, name, address, social security number. So that sends up an automatic red flag that if you don't have at least that basic information, as a county sheriff, I have to also think about the citizens before this person is released, whether it's after they've been sentenced or whether they have served their entire time with us. So it is only common sense that we have to make our checks. With those checks is that we would definitely fall within what's called the jail enforcement model. That means is that when a person is being released and they have a hold for them, whether that be from another city or another state, another country, or in this particular instance, a detainer, we would not honor detainers. We would honor actual warrants that are consistent with the Fourth Amendment against illegal searches and seizure. Again, this comes back to constitutional policing, holding our federal partners accountable. Send us the right paperwork, come pick up this person. With inside of that, if the person cannot be identified, then of course through the Geneva Convention Act, we also have the responsibility of letting them contact their consulars. If the consulars don't respond, then again, there's where you would have to look at the legitimacy of this person that is in your custody, of them being documented or undocumented. But I'm not concerned about going out into communities, to businesses, doing roundups of persons. We're a nation of immigrants. Everybody in here is an immigrant.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we also have processes in terms of how we're verified. So all persons, in my opinion, should follow that same model.
As far as the what I noted as an intrusion, as far as the militarization of this effort, what would be the policy? Would it just be stand down and allow the federal government to conduct their procedure, as it were? I mean, or does local law enforcement have a responsibility to protect the citizens against the federal government? Is that a crazy question?
Well, no, it's not a crazy question. That was the original intent of the Constitution, was to protect the rights of the people from government intrusion. Now, if you're coming in, I don't care whether you're federal, state, or local, when you come in to manifest any incident, to search, seizure, or arrest, you need the proper documentation. So we're not just going to allow for people to come in, regardless of what agency, to just bully folks around. If you got your proper documents consistent with Fourth Amendment requirements, then by all means, do your job, but do it consistent with inside of the rule of law. If I am called upon as the county sheriff to protect a citizen's right, then I have that particular responsibility to ensure that those things are in place. And I'm not speaking, in terms of bullying or trying to have standoffs, but that's what a sheriff is elected to do, is to protect the people of his county.
Absolutely. So every month, 7,200 men purchase sex from a minor, accounting for more than 8,000 sex acts. Another study by Georgia Cares claims that more than 90% of domestic minor sex trafficking victims in Georgia were enrolled in school at the time of their exploitation. According to the Shapiro Group, which conducted research on prostitution and sexual exploitation, 65% of men who purchase sex with female children in metro Atlanta live in suburban areas. It could be happening right next door, and you would have no idea. And that's why I stated those statistics. Federal law used to state that pimping a minor was a misdemeanor, not a felony. Girls as young as 13 would be brought into juvenile court on prostitution charges, and the pimps who abused, harassed, and sold them would be let off much more easily. Now, with Atlanta being such a hub for human sex trafficking, what are some of the ways you would deal with this unfortunately growing problem? And also, I want to tell our audience that we are sharing the website for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the National Human Trafficking Hotline as well. And you'll see that going under the screen.
Well, it tied right into a point I was going to make, but honestly, you brought it right where it was supposed to be. We're concerned about immigration in terms of undocumented persons coming into the United States, but we're not concerned about the number of undocumented persons that are coming into the United States for purposes of sex, particular children. I'm very concerned and very, very, very perturbed about that, particularly because Atlanta is that international city. We're not too far from the Savannah port. We're not too far from the airport down the street. We're not too far off, just coincidentally, a couple of blocks over from Metropolitan Avenue, which was notoriously known as Stewart Avenue, where you could find sex any which way that you wanted to. Now, I'm not going to tell you I approve of prostitution. It's been around since the day, for a long time. Right, since a day.
Yes.
But, what a grown woman, a grown man decide they want to do with their intimacy, when you start bothering children, I have a very serious issue and concern with that. We are responsible for monitoring the sex offenders list in Georgia in conjunction with the GBI. The GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, maintains the list. However, we're responsible for coming in and doing checks. There are a lot of people within inside of the sex offenders registry who will essentially tell you what is going on out inside of communities. That's why I believe in intelligence, developing relationships with people who otherwise are just as sick of it as anybody else. With that, we also have a county jail filled with inmates who do not like sex predators. So they'll be the first that will tell you who these particular guys are, where they're inhabited at, what have you. Again, it's just a matter of beginning to get a more progressive sheriff's office that will develop units that specialize in going after human trafficking, meeting those particular problems where they are, whether it's inside of the strip clubs, whether it's on the street, whether it's on the internet. We're going to take a proactive approach. to dealing with that, particularly in the name of children.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that. One more, another situation that we've become all too familiar with within the last few years is the growing specter of shootings and other violent acts in our schools and even in our places of worship, whether it be in the church, the synagogue, or the masjid. The school systems almost have no choice but to give students a plan to adhere to in case of emergency. But I personally witnessed the debate of whether or not to hold active shooter drills in the worship space. What is your take on how to address this extremely tenuous circumstance?
Yes, sir. What was once the most sacred place in the world has now become the most dangerous place in the world, more or less because of active shooter situations. In those active shooter situations, we have people who essentially have no reverence or regard for God or for worship. So we must take the most necessary proactive countermeasures to deal with those particular persons inside of a sanctuary, in the curtilage out in the parking lot, but also in terms of protecting your pastors. With that, I have specialized and I've been featured on the AIB network. I've been featured on Fox News in specials about providing security for worship centers, showing churches how to proactively deal with active shooter situations under an emergency management plan. With that, people are not going to be coming to churches because they got good singing or because they got good preaching. People are going to be evaluating, is your church safe enough in this day and time? Not just churches, as you said, masjids, synagogues, wherever. I don't care what your brand of worship and religion is, you deserve your First Amendment right to express your worship without the threat of violence. So those are key things that I would like to work with pastors on, congregations, setting up patrol plans where on Sundays we can have our reserve unit dedicated towards visiting churches, but more or less interacting and letting our presence be known that Fulton County will be the safest place for worship. This is our cradle of civil rights. It's going to continue to be our place of where people can observe God without violence.
Amen. I was going to ask if you were proposing any sort of special detail for just a peace of mind, a security kind of detail, and you answered that question.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, absolutely. One more question. There was a situation with one of our prominent members of our music community returning from Birmingham, Alabama, and heading back to Atlanta, being stopped by a state trooper and avoiding what could have been a very ugly incident. He kept his head and dealt with the situation in a way that probably saved his life. Our communities, not just the musical community, have an honestly acquired, tenuous relationship with law enforcement. In the South, the economics that drove the creation of police forces were centered on the preservation of the slavery system. So how do you see this situation in particular and the entire scope of the relationship in general, and what can we do to begin healing the rift?
Foremost, I am a author of a program of racial profiling prevention. It was one of the first things that I did when I came back from the United States Department of Justice in a symposium meeting with then the late Janet Reno and some of the attorneys from the Civil Rights Division. While we were sitting there studying statistics, I said we really need a program, a training that actually will teach law enforcement officers about what racial profiling actually is, as opposed to just talking about statistics. So I reached a little bit deeper, a little bit further, and I actually traced back racial profiling back to the Royal Legislature of Georgia. Before Georgia became a state, it was a colony. So it had specific laws in terms of how it dealt with so-called slaves coming into the United States, using slave patrols to whip and to keep them in order. You can look that up online for the sake of the conversation. That unfortunately has turned into a system of what I call generational mindsets that is now not just affecting any particular group of officers, but now just the entire culture of agencies as they deal with black communities, brown communities, poor white communities, what have you. Again, I'm 100% against discrimination. I'm for the enforcement of law as it stands based upon the facts and circumstances, but using race and bias as that particular basis, absolutely not. And I'm proud of that particular person who used emotional intelligence and said, I can survive this. Unfortunately, and I got to say this, we want law enforcement to reform. We want law enforcement to reform, but even in our own communities, we've got some reforming to do ourselves. So I know I'm going to get some rotten tomatoes on that particular commentary, but I want to be able to come in like I've done before, continuously educating youth about their constitutional rights and responsibilities when they interact with law enforcement, because it doesn't have to go that particular direction in some of the scenes that I have come across. But more or less, I'm going to make sure that all agencies that come through our academy are trained in that racial profiling piece.
I'm glad you made that point, because there is some accountability that we have to have. Law enforcement is not going anywhere. Law enforcement is an integer in our society that is both necessary and, especially if something happens in your house, you're going to want to call the police. But we also have to know how to respond and how to behave. And I don't mean behave like kowtow.
Absolutely.
I mean how to conduct yourself as a mature, thinking human being. And I understand that there is some responsibility that you just have to take like that. And you can't just fly off the handle and act any kind of way and expect it to be okay. So, I'm glad you made that point. And I also am glad that our common friend handled that in the way that he did, because it just proved that with emotional intelligence, you can de-escalate a situation and end up coming home to your family.
And watch this, Kipper. At the end of the day, I want Fulton County to be safe, because now we're the entertainment capital of the South. As a matter of fact, we're taking over L.A.
Yeah.
We're pushing you guys out
It's going
the
to give
way.
it a little more benefit than that.
But watch this. At the end of the day, I've had a very good relationship with the music community here, the entertainment community. I've helped a lot of guys over there to keep and stay out of trouble, not mentioning any person's names or any particular groups. But at the end of the day, I'm very concerned about our welfare. I'm concerned about our economic prosperity, but I'm also concerned about protecting human life. And if we can do that in collaboration with music to get that message out, particularly over in the Fulton County Jail, to get that 95% black male population up out of there, man, you'd be surprised at some of the talents these guys have there at the Fulton County Jail. Let me hook them up with guys like you all on conditional releases. Help us turn it around, because we can't do it by ourselves.
Well, that was my question too, and I said, what can we do to begin to heal the rift? And if that's what we have to do, then I hope y'all are listening to all my other compadres out there in our musical community, this fantastic musical community in Atlanta.
Very fantastical.
Yes, absolutely.
It's fantastical word.
Fantastical? We'll use it. I use it all the time.
I'll take it.
Absolutely. One more question. Understanding that the black vote is not monolithic, as evidenced by the current president's last visit here to Atlanta, one of the now front-running Democratic candidates has a problematic past with a law enforcement issue, in specific the stop and frisk policy. While he has since apologized once he announced his candidacy. The residual effect of this policy on black and brown young men in New York City, New York City, like Khalif Browder, is extremely troubling. So what are the implications of a policy like stop and frisk being implemented on a national level?
And not taking a stab at Mike Bloomberg, one thing I will appreciate is the fact, outside of any other candidate or any other person that's committed that atrocity, he first began with the apology. But after the apology comes the repair of the damage. Mm-hmm. So with that, an apology of just saying, I'm sorry, is meaningless, especially when you're coming into a community that was been totally affected. Not just the people of New York City, but it also became almost officers believed that that was the industry best practice of stop and frisk based upon an unconstitutional infringement. Now, stop and frisk is a legal doctrine based upon a case called Terry versus Ohio, which gives an officer an ability to make the scene safe for him based upon probable cause, actual facts and circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe that you have committed a crime or in the commission of a crime. You can't just pick out and choose people based upon black and brown. And in this particular instance, we did hear Mr. Bloomberg said, we're stopping too many whites and not enough blacks and Hispanics. These were his words. So if you're going to be the leader in the free world of national policy, then we've got to look at your past actions in terms of what did you support that otherwise is now so controversial. And with that, as a sheriff that has just as much elected authority as the president of the United States, is to take on that same responsibility of developing sound policies that will deal specifically and directly with unconstitutional infringements such as stop and frisk. Too many black, too many brown have been affected by it. And the black voters must remember this, that we can say never again. It won't happen in our communities, but we've got to exercise that vote properly and hold people accountable, whether they're federal, state, or local, to what their job demands.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Charles Rambo, thank you.
Mr. Kipper Jones, thank you very much for having me on your show.
Oh, no, absolutely. My very first guest on my debut show. I'm excited to have you. Would you like to share with the folks where they can reach you? And
yes, sir.
Go right ahead. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Charles Rambo, running for Fulton County Sheriff. Imagine going and sitting with someone in a barbershop or inside of a beauty shop or just in casual conversation, and all the pressing issues that we have inside of America, but particular black communities. You had someone in your midst that otherwise could do something about a problem that you're facing. I am that particular person running for sheriff who would have independent authority to get things done exceedingly and abundantly above what anybody is expected. That's through 30 years of expertise. I need your help. I'm not depending upon, special interest. I'm not depending upon anyone other than grassroots to fund my campaign, because I will not be bought and I will not be bossed by people who otherwise like things the way that they are. With that, please go to my website, learn more about me, be an informed voter. You can learn about me at RamboForSheriff2020.com, but most important, when you get there, we need your donation. We need grassroots donation so that we can run a strong campaign based upon the principles that we've just talked about here. And I thank Brother Jones for allowing me to throw that out there.
No, I appreciate you. Appreciate you for taking out the time to come. You're out there on the campaign trail. You don't have a lot of time to waste. So listen, before we go, this has been quite informative and a very serious discussion, and I appreciate you taking out the time to do it.
Thank you.
But I would like to have a little fun right quick, and this brings me up to a little game we like to call Think Fast.
And thank you for this beautiful mug.
Oh, listen. We'll talk about that in a moment.
I feel like I'm on the Kip Carson show.
I'm gonna get my producer to put up our Think Fast situation here. Ta-da! All right. So,
wow.
Now, what I'm gonna do is you have 60 seconds. I'm gonna shoot some 60 seconds. So you got a little time. Take your time.
Okay.
I want your best response to some questions I'm gonna throw at you, and. Take a deep breath and tell me when you're ready. And that clock up there, give me my 60-second counter. All right, and go. All right. Okay, so what was the first concert you went to and when?
Cameo, 1987.
Okay. Me and you, your mama and your
Daddy.
right. Mac or PC?
Definitely Mac.
Best barbecue in Atlanta.
Sonny's. No, I take that back. Pit Boss.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. That's my preference.
Your favorite Maze song? Favorite Frankie Beverly and Maze song?
Southern Girl.
All right. Your favorite Rolling Stones song?
Pass.
Wine, red or white?
Red.
Who said education and work are the levers to uplift the people?
Frederick Douglass.
W.B. Du Bois.
Close.
Sexual Chocolate is from...
Eddie Murphy. Yeah, there you go. Vanilla chocolate.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Officer Charles Rambo.
I do have a sense of humor.
He has more than just a sense of humor. He's a funny guy. Listen, thank you again, man. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you,
And
Kipper, and I
appreciate
wish you much success in your endeavor moving forward. Moving forward
With
with this program. Thank you.
That's what we'll be doing, man. Thank you again so very much for taking out the time to come. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for tuning in to Know Better. This has been our first episode, and I'm extremely excited about where we're going with this. I want to thank the Status Network for giving a singer-songwriter with a conscience and an opportunity to use it. And thank you to my producer, Yannette Keith, and Cush over there, and my assistant, Kamanti Carter. The voice, Mr. Reggie Prime. My manager, David Johnny Cornegay, excuse me, and to David for sharing me with the world. And thank all of you for tuning in. I hope you take something away from this evening that made you more informed or more educated than when you tuned in. I really appreciate you. And let's remember the words of Dr. Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you do better. Hashtag knowing is hot. You'll see that soon. Go to Kipper Jones and download my new single, I Want You. I don't know, have you heard it?
I have not heard it.
Well, then you need to go to the website. It's kipperjones.com and download the new single. And if you like the Know Better mugs that you see on the table here, you can get your own if you go to kipperjones.com and click the Know Better Show button and order your own mug. And yes, sir, that is your gift for coming tonight.
Wow,
we
I
really
thought you was
appreciate
going to actually take this back, but I would definitely
no,
hang
you
this.
actually can take that home and share it with the wife.
My prize
How
mugs.
about it? Yes.
Can I also give a quick shout out?
Please.
I'm giving a quick shout out first and foremost to my mom. Thank you for bringing me into this world to express myself the way that I do. My wife Kelly, as well as my dear daughter Marissa. You should be in bed by now, but thank you for staying up and watching your daddy. I hope to make you proud more than anything.
Oh, well, thank you for that too. I love your family. They're great people.
Well, thank
They're
you,
awesome
sir.
people. So until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. God bless you. God keep you. Good night.
The views and opinions expressed on Know Better are those of its host and guest and do not reflect those of the Status Network or any of its affiliates.